All right, hello everybody. Coach Anthony again, talking about lighting inside of UEFN. Last time I talked about the day sequence manager, and I also talked about the four lights that you can use in UEFN, which is a point light, a spotlight, a directional light, a skylight, and a rec light. Five lights, I guess. And I just showed you basic examples of how you can use them. I also talked about implementing a cube map and whatnot into your scene. And today we're going to look at some cooler things that you can do with lighting. So, first thing I want to show is the fact that Roblox does have a lighting folder here. And not only does it have one here, but it also has in galleries here, it has lights. And you can actually use these to create a lot of really, really cool things. They have a whole light gallery here of, of assets just in case you don't want to custom make something. There's already quite a bit of stuff created here, and a lot of it actually looks pretty good. Right, as you can see, the fireworks are pretty good there. You can get some leaves. Get some like leaves trailing in the wind. Looks pretty good. Get some sparkles. So without me clicking on it, you can see that's what it would look like. And of course, you can always kind of change some of this stuff up. So here's the idle FX. Here we go, lighting channels. You can change quite a bit of stuff here. Here's the particle system. So if you click down on these components, you do actually get some abstraction, and you can actually kind of manipulate how some of this stuff actually does look. You can also change some of the materials as well. That's more for the actual mesh component and not so much for the particles, but you do have some customization there on some objects. So I just wanted to show that. That was something I didn't necessarily touch on in the last tutorial, but these do exist, and they do have their use cases where they can be very beneficial. So without further ado, let's get into the next part. So that was that. But as you can see here, that's not the only thing you have here inside of the Fortnite folder. You also have the ability to click on the lighting folder here, and you have quite a bit of stuff here. So first off, if you wanted to use a cube map, you actually have some cube maps that you can use here if you ever wanted to use those, right? And these are kind of nice because you can essentially like apply them and then make kind of like your own like skybox area. So that's one thing that these have that are really, really nice. You also have some tools here so you can manage the amount of exposure in your scene here. You can already see when I drag this in, it already has some, it already kind of manipulates how this looks. But you have some settings here to help you manage the exposure. Exposure, again, is how much it's going to brighten up and darken in a specific area. Right, and you also have a lighting scalability, which just tells you whether your lighting is going to scale and not cause any issues in the game when you run it. And it kind of helps you out here. I can refresh the scalability and then add some actors to my scene here and say, okay, well, what it would look like if I did it on low, high, epic, and cinematic. And then to change your scalability here would be right here. So this is how you would change your scalability, and essentially the larger this goes, the nicer it looks. Okay. Most of the time when people play, they have everything set to low because it just costs a lot of resources to render lighting, and most people just don't like spending resources on things like that. Okay. All right. So let's next look at what are probably one of the most important lighting tools, just not only in game in UEFN, but in game development in general, and that's going to be your post-process. I think every single game engine, except for I think like Roblox Studio, has something like a post-process. And let's first talk about what post-process is. So whenever you create light, right, there's the actual creation of the light, but then you have the ability after the lighting is created to manipulate it and affect it. And essentially the post-process is the thing that happens after everything's been processed. You know, that's why they call it post-process. So what do I mean when I say processed? Well, you know, the light has been created. It's reflecting off of all of these different objects. I'm obviously seeing the light, right? So like after all of those calculations have been done, meaning the light has been created. It's been created a specific color. It's reflecting off of all of these things, right? After all of that has been created, how do we want to further add stuff to the lighting after it's been created? Right, so that's essentially what a post-process is. It's what happens after the lighting has been created or processed, right? So I'm going to come here and I'm just going to go ahead and add a couple of these just so you can see, you know, just what they do. Let me add a old cartoon because I think this would be kind of fun for y'all to see. But as you can see, it has a massive effect on how my game looks, right? Obviously, you may want to change the can be damaged there because you don't want the process to get destroyed, right? Oak is going to kind of give the floor this like oakish look. You have a neon party. You make it look kind of neon here, right? You have a horror movie, so you kind of get that dim horror movie look, right? And all these are pre-compiled. This looks like a classic film, so black and white. But all these are already compiled for you, and essentially just to use these, you would drag them in. Now, you may be asking, how do you affect what the post-process does? It's actually not as bad as you think. You essentially just drag this in here, and remember my conversation about actors and components, right? Here is the component post-process, which is going to manipulate this. And you have the ability to manipulate all these different things here. Bloom essentially is going to be like how much it's glaring at you, right? And you have the ability to change the threshold there. You also have exposure, which is like the brightness, and it's based upon this compensation, right? So the higher this is, the more it's going to compensate for that exposure, meaning brighten up. And the smaller this is, the more it's going to make it darker, right? So it depends on how much it's going to compensate for brightness and darkness in the scene, essentially, right? And you can set a min and a max brightness. You can also change how much it speeds up and slows down because this kind of automates over time, essentially. So like if I was here and in this box, let's say this was the trigger volume, and then I left and went over here, right? How would that change? So like, for example, if you were going in a cave, right? You wouldn't want it to go from bright, dark, right? You'd want to slowly get darker over time, and that's how you would manage that, is in the exposure here. Okay, whenever you see the word chromatic and you're dealing with lighting, think color, right? So this changes how intense the colors are going to be, and also allows you to offset it. A dirt mask. So imagine that like you were playing a game and the character dove in mud and there was mud on his face. You could simulate that mud by adding a dirt mask texture to essentially simulate like mud being on the face. You can change how the camera is manipulated here, whether you want it to shutter and things like that. You also have local exposure here. Lens flare is like if I point the camera up at the sun, right? The sun's going to reflect back and create that little flare effect, right? So that's done with what's called a lens flare. You can change how the color gradient is created here so that they give you access to the entire color gradient here. You can also add some post-processing material. So this whole flickery scene here is created from that post-process material. This cartoon, let's see if we can pull up what the material looks like. But anyways, let me show you what happens when I get rid of it, right? So let me delete this real quick. As you can see, that flickering went away. So that was done via the material there. And that's essentially what that does, is it does that effect. And then, of course, I can bring it back. Cool. And then I can change how much it blends in and whatnot. Right, how much this is going to blend with the normal lighting, how much the blend radius is. How much priority it gets. And yeah, that's pretty much it for post-process. This is another one that I would use a lot. So essentially, like, I would combine. Generally, when you create lighting, what you generally want to do is you generally want to first off by creating some point lights and directional lights, right? Then you're going to add your daylight here. Day sequencer, right? This is going to then create your initial lighting setup, right? Whether you want more of these or not by creating a trigger volume is totally up to you, right? But then you would create your normal lighting look. So say I want this kind of be blue. Color, yeah, we'll take that blue. This is let's go into sunlight. Make the sunlight less white, more of that kind of grayish color with a little bit of yellow overtone. There we go. Change down the intensity. Right, so this is generally how you would create the lighting to begin with. Kind of phase that up just a little bit. Create some more skylight here. Again, kind of going for that kind of golden sunset hour look here. Boom, change the sky up. Kind of like the sky, maybe just a darker color there. There we go. I could change it to something crazy like green, for example, right? And you can kind of see the green outcast look in the back there. Sure, why not? We'll just change this to green just so you all can see how this works. And there's kind of that gradient blend. There we go. Change the sun size up a little bit. I'll kind of just blend it in just a hair here. I don't want it to be too overwhelming. There we go. Why not? Green sky. Clouds. Make them blue, because why not? There we go. Kind of get some blue clouds. So generally you would create lighting using that. And then you would add like whatever other lights you needed. Like let's say you wanted like some atmospheric stuff, and then you would add a post-process volume to further enhance what was going on. Kind of like that, right? Or another good example would be adding the oak one, so the floor has like that oak look, right? And then you can come in here and adjust this further. But yeah, that's pretty much all we really have for lighting. It's not something that takes too long to get used to, but it is something that takes a long time to practice and work with to get the results that you desire. So if you have any questions on this video, please let us know in the comments, and I will see you all in the next one.